Hello from Cambridge. I'm glad to introduce you our social impact audit tool, which was developed together with several colleagues at ANSYS Granta, and in particular based on works by Professor Mike Ashby from University of Cambridge. So what is social impact audit tool? Social impact audit tool is Excel-based and it has educational value. It can provide a quick introduction to the human and social impacts of the life cycle of products. It is very closely linked to methodology developed in UNEP-CETAC social SLCA guidelines and can be used as a lead into this methodology and its conceptualizations. It could be also used as an input for CSR reporting, which can help to provide support for product development decision making. The tool has its limitations. It's Excel-based and it gives information only at the national level, but not to site-specific issues. However, we have received lots of good feedback from the courses where this tool was already used. Each phase of product life involves the flow of materials, energy, and money. So this is a representation of product life, from extraction of natural resources to material production, then to product manufacturing, product use, and various ways to end it of its first life, as well as opportunities for recycling, reengineering, reconditioning, or reusing. So when we talked about sustainability and assessment, we talked about environmental, economic impacts, and social consequences of product life. We need to introduce the concept of capitals, and this is the next thing I will do now. So to go into more details, we need to introduce the concept of capital. So natural capital is a clean atmosphere, fertile land, fresh water, productive oceans, healthy biosphere, accessible material and energy resources. Manufactured capital is a built environment, industrial capacity, like financial health, sometimes measured by GDP, investment capacity, and human social capital, knowledge, education, skills, culture, social cohesion, human health, and happiness. So we are looking at the sustainability challenges and interlinkages and synergies as a matter of these synergies between these different capitals, so natural, manufactured, and social and human capital. To address these capitals in a sustainable way, we need to understand how they are interlinked and what kind of social and environmental impact our economic activity brings. So we already know that to assess natural capital and the impact on natural capital, there is a very established environmental life cycle assessment. For manufactured and financial capital, there is a life cycle costing. While for human and social capital, we know that the social life cycle assessment exists. So there's various origins. The environmental life cycle assessment was introduced in early 90s, and that's also has some methods like ISO 14000 series. There are also various approaches for life cycle costing, for technical cost modeling. For social LCA, there was, as already mentioned, UNEP-CETAC guidelines from 2009, and specifically guidelines for social life cycle assessment of products, which the updated version will be introduced in this during this conference. And we will be looking at this specific assessment. So let's look how we will be approaching this social life cycle assessment with our tool. Right. For that, we need to understand a bit more about their goal for social life cycle assessment. So the goal is to improve social conditions and socioeconomic performance associated with a product throughout its life. We also need to understand the social hotspots. The social hotspots are a point of contact between stakeholders and aspects of the materials, manufacture, distribution, and use of the product that may potentially be damaging or could be influenced in a positive way. Guidelines for social life cycle assessment of products provide stakeholder groups, such as workers, consumers, local communities, society, and value chain actors. These have assigned impact categories. Here you see some examples of those. We have mapped into data points from UN, from World Bank, and other organizations for each nation of the world. And this we've done for each impact category. We have mapped this way 29 out of 31 impact categories provided in the guidelines. So what we did, we ranked nations by value and rescaled them to range from 1, so least good, and 200, so best practice. Here we are, that's an example. So because the sources vary in scales and some are simple rankings, some using quantitative data, so we have converted all into ranked lists, and this is the best way to make sure that they're all in the same way followed. So the result is a spreadsheet of nations of the world with impact categories ranked by best practice. And here you see an example of this, which has 5 stakeholder groups, as mentioned before. This is for 204 nations. And you have here best practice rating for 29 impact categories with the data points. What you can also do in this spreadsheet, you can click on any of these categories and you have a little information about this specific category, like ecological footprint in this case. So how to use the tool? We need to identify the nations involved in product life. We need to open sources page of the tool, highlighting the nations by clicking in tick box. We select threshold good practice between 1 and 100. And then we copy rows to report, and then thinking about the impact assessment and actions which one can take using the tool. So let's look at the example. The example is a cotton t-shirt which is made in Australia, manufactured in Bangladesh, and transported via sea channel and Panama Channel. The use is in the UK, disposal is Kenya. So are there reasons for social concern here? So in the tool, we need to highlight nations in the source page of the spreadsheet, like Australia and Bangladesh, for example. We need to set the hotspot threshold, say 25. And then all the countries which will be below this threshold, their numbers are below, they will be highlighted in red. So we need to copy selected rows to report. And then they have this in the report. So only those countries which are related to our case studies, and then the red will be those which are below the threshold, and the green which are above. Analyzing the hotspots. So the next step is to transcribe hotspots to hotspot table. Here it is. So we can look at the back of the source from which the data is coming from to get a bit more context. We will examine now by column and by row to assess risk to product and brand image. For instance, we can see that there is a high stakeholder hotspot density in some of these places, and here we can see high national hotspot density. So some nations have more hotspots to be aware of. And the next step is to consider actions. And here we can have actions to improve socio-economic across supply chain, like joint actions with the stakeholders to improve education, healthcare, and housing, or partnership agreements to share management and ownerships. Alternatively, it could be actions involving adjustment to supply chain. And this is, for example, due to irredeemable corruption, conflict, or political instability, as well as damage limitation, like actions to offset negative publicity. So the final report includes the purpose of social impact audit, and significant concerns and opportunities, as well as actions and recommendations. So we give examples of those significant concerns, for example, serious human rights infringements or corruption or conflict, political instability. But we also encourage very much to look at opportunities, so what it means for potential social investments in this region, like engagement with local culture and skills, capacity building, synergy with local enterprise and governance, enabling of improved access to education, healthcare, etc. In terms of actions recommendations, it's pretty much also depends on the significance of the social impact and what is possible to do in this region. For instance, there could be some direct investments in the local infrastructure and partnership agreements with their shared management and ownership. But if it is a dramatic adjustment of supply chain needed, then there might be some aspects of inspection on on-site monitoring, provision of training or best practice standards, potentially change of provider, even if it's in irredeemable conditions or corruption or conflict or political instability. So these all suggestions, and of course the idea is to have this space for discussion and sharing best practice. So that's it from me. If you would like to learn more, please download our paper on social life cycle assessment and social impact audit tool, available through this link below. Thank you very much.